Good morning, everyone. I think we're the only thing standing between you and lunch, so I'm Mike Fascitelli. I'm going to have the honor of moderating this panel. I'm not going to go through the bios. I'd like everyone to introduce themselves and then just give a minute or two overview of what their firm does, because I'm not sure how familiar you all are with their various roles in the firm. So let's start with Gary.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Gary LaBarbera. I'm the president of the New York City Building Trades Council, representing 15 national and international unions and 100,000 unionized construction workers in the city of New York. Primarily, what the Building Council Trades does is, Building Trades Council, does, is we really address policy issues in terms of construction in the city. We deal directly with construction managers in terms of negotiations with project labor agreements. We advocate for safe working conditions and essentially represent all of the unions in terms of bargaining and lobbying on proposed legislation. So that's essentially what we do.
I'm Jay Badami, President and Chief Operating Officer of Tishman Construction. Tishman is an AECOM company. I also oversee all the operations of Tishman and Hunt in the United States and Canada. That's around 4,000 employees. AECOM purchased Tishman in the year 2010, so we are now a publicly traded company. Of course, with the stock market the way it is, I'm not sure we're in a buy situation right now, but hopefully we've all hit the bottom and upward is the way to go. So as a builder in New York, we've done some signature projects like the Plaza Hotel, the World Trade Center, multiple towers down there, and right now it's a very good time to be in business in this city.
Hello, I'm Richard Wood. I'm President and CEO of Plaza Construction. Plaza was recently acquired by CSCEC, the world's largest real estate construction enterprise. 250,000 employees, 120 million in revenue. We are their United States building representative, and they're looking for a tremendous amount of growth. So, we have very high prospects going forward.
Jeff Devoret, Head of Development for Quafu Properties. We're a New York-owned and based real estate development and investment company. Based on our name, you can tell we have strong ties to China, and we act as a bridge for many Chinese investors, joint venture partners that are seeking either real estate investment, real estate development exposure here in New York. And we partnered that Chinese capital by building a very strong team of local experts who can execute and advise the partners that we work with abroad. And in about 2 years of operations, we've put together about 1.5 million square foot real estate development pipeline, all of which is in New York City.
So by implication, the title, when Meg called me to do this, the title of this panel is Sky High Cost, in a building boom. So that implies the costs are obviously quite high and they've risen quite quickly. So to set the stage, we're going to talk about what is the current market for construction costs, and ask these guys if they could give us a glimpse into the future. But how many here are active in any development project right now? How many of you have seen costs rise quite significantly? Okay, so maybe the title is apropos. I think I want to start with Jay and just ask Jay to tell me what he sees going on right now in the construction market. Kind of what kind of escalations you've seen, what kind of conditions you've seen over the last year or two, and then say the current, then we'll go to the future.
Sure. Right now, Tishman, we're very busy, but of course we're still looking for work. So if anybody needs a good builder, please give us a call. I'm seeing right now probably 5 to 6% escalation. Tishman is a union contractor. We're in a period where we have a supply and demand problem. We have a lot of work. We have full employment. I see Dick Anderson in the crowd somewhere, and Dick puts out a New York Building Congress, New York Building Foundation outlook that really demonstrates that there's about $40 billion worth of work, 135,000 tradesmen are employed. So we have a couple issues. We have a lot of headwinds just by virtue of not having enough contractors that bid competitively, not enough skilled workers, and we've always working with Gary to my right to help increase that partnership, and that's doing a couple things. That's allowing the non-union competitors of ours to really get right on our tails as far as the amount of work. So we've worked with Gary before on project labor agreements, and we know a PLA is good in a bad market, but it's bad in a good market. So we happen to be in a good market right now. We're PLAs, and we all collectively, Richard and myself, have to ask Gary for cost reductions and blended crews, and it's tough to do that when there's full employment out there. So Gary internally has challenges as we have challenges in the business. But all the sectors right now are rolling on all the cylinders, especially with the amount of public work that's coming out, whether it be Javits, whether it be Moynihan Station, LaGuardia, and certainly the Build It Back work that is being done for DDC. So full employment, so it's good news and it's also bad news.
Rich, you want to comment?
Yeah, I think Jay touched on a point. The subcontractor base is not growing, and the infrastructure on a trade-by-trade basis within the given subcontractors is limited. We're not seeing new subcontractors coming to the market, and we're actually seeing a reduction in numbers of subcontractors going out, being absorbed by other companies. And so competition is getting less and less in the unionized construction industry, which is forcing less competition and forcing, dramatic escalation in some cases because the subcontractors that are capable of bidding realize that their competition is limited, and so you see prices going sky high.
What do you think the rise of 15 over 14 was for like hardcore construction, if you took a guess? One of the things that's interesting about the market is a lot of the projects, especially the residential projects, are being designed to much higher end levels. Starchitects are being hired, so it's hard to compare year over year because the projects are so very unique. Yeah.
But I do believe that we saw a 15% escalation in that 1 year, and I think a lot of that had to do with the absorption of the capability of the subcontracting market.
One thing I'd like to ask Gary, because many people have commented that what happened was that in the recession, we've lost a lot of capacity, and then, if we had so many trades and so many people, as Rich pointed out, so many subcontractors, people working in the industry, that decline, it hasn't quite recovered, even though we've obviously been out of that recession for quite a while. What do you see going on, given that you represent, and what is that a perception that correct or not?
So what I would say is this, I mean, Rich and Jay are right on point in terms of the subcontractor base. In terms of the trades, I mean, we do have the good fortune currently of being fully employed and anticipate being fully employed over the next several years. During the recession, it was a very different time. There was 20% unemployment in some trades. In other trades, it was actually higher than 20%. It was as much as 30 or 40% unemployment, and that really led way to the advent of project labor agreements to create economic scenarios in which projects could move forward, and they were very successful. There was a perception that during that time, a number of tradesmen took their skills and worked on any project they possibly could, and I'm sure that did happen in some cases. But today, because of the robust environment, all of those so-called union tradesmen and women that were working non-union are back in the halls and back out on the jobs. And actually, many of the trades are really increasing their apprentice recruitments and bringing in very, very large numbers of apprentices, because we recognize there's going to be a capacity issue going forward in the next couple of years, and largely because of some of the public and massive projects. I mean, when you talk about LaGuardia Airport, you're talking about, between the Port Authority and Delta, $7 billion worth of activity, which the Port Authority is going to start in earnest in August, and Delta will be right behind them. And you talk about what's going on the west side of Manhattan. Jay mentions Javits. It's a very robust, ambitious plan that the governor has for Penn South. I mean, there's going to be just an enormous absorption of tradespeople on these massive projects, which, to Richie's point, then creates this void on smaller residential work and makes things much more difficult for us to compete in those areas. And as Jay points out, even to the Sandy Build It Back, where the majority of that work now is going to be performed under a project labor agreement with the city, again, that's going to be another 5,000 tradespeople that are going to be working on those projects. So capacity is going to be an issue for everybody.
Well, let me turn to Jeff for just a second, and then come back to the union versus non-union. Jeff, what does this all mean for you as a developer? Obviously, you're trying to pro forma cost. If you're developing your own land or bidding for land, how do you factor in what these guys are saying to your thinking about projects?
Well, yeah, it's a good question, and I think, just to take a step back on the development spectrum, when we're looking at a new deal, there are only a couple of really big cost inputs into any project, right? Obviously, the cost of land is a huge component. The cost of hard costs is probably, number two, and at some point, I think that flipped. It used to maybe be the other way around, but with rising land prices, now land is clearly, in many cases, number one. Hard cost is number two. We look at, the duration, interest carry, the cost of financing, and most of the other costs in there are relatively small compared to everything else. So, when we're looking at this and looking at underwriting a new deal, obviously, if we can work with a group like Jay or Richie on our, pre-development, we know that we're going to get a good estimate looking forward as to what it's going to be. I think that the potentially some of the uptick that we've seen in construction costs has been on paper as well. I think that lots of deals, we sit in a position where we do our own development. People come to us for co-development opportunities as well. And some of the forecasting and the performance that we get across our desk are just absolutely unreasonable. People don't know how to forecast construction costs. And so when it comes out to what you started to what you ended up with, it could be substantially more than 15% if you didn't do a good job estimating it the first time. But to bring it back, it really starts to limit when we think about the real cost of what it is to build buildings today, the availability of labor, the cost of land, the pool of finding deals that will work for our investment criteria. And I think I speak for a lot of people in the room. It's really like threading the needle. And so it's causing us and other developers to look for other things, looking for ways to reduce costs, but also what other kinds of opportunities are there out there, maybe being a little bit more creative than the typical ground-up development.
We'll come back to how we may reduce costs, but one of the things that is happening in the market is land costs have gone up so high and so quickly, and it makes rental projects very difficult to do, if at all. You have beside the 80-20 flux you have going on with the state, affordable housing laws. But, and then if you're a developer, you have X, you try to seek it somewhere else. And if construction costs are going up, you're already behind the eight ball on two of the most important, if not. Good thing interest rates are low, because that's kind of offsetting some of this impact. So, I see an awful lot of what I call busted or missed construction budget, where it's $7-8 million higher. And part of that is what Rich said, the market's more competitive, so people are putting in better kitchens, better baths, better amenities, and part of it's just escalation, not even getting into star architecture, which is another trend. So I think this trend is escalated everything. So one question would be, what would happen to land costs? Because there's no end in sight for construction going up, given the capacity this year. I wouldn't say you could predict escalation's not going to be pretty good this year. So, which goes back to, we hear a lot about union, non-union. I'll start with you because you represent the unions. I'll give you a first shot. But a lot of people are talking about open shop, including both, trying to get capacity, trying to get down costs. How do you react to that, given that you have a little bit of a bias, I think, in this?
Well, obviously that I do have a bit of a bias.
I'm always afraid to take on a union guy. He's a lot bigger than me, too.
It's no accident that I put him next to me.
If I disappear, please find me.
Now you have a little bit of a bias. So let me answer that question. Look, the reality is that each trade is becoming, I think, and I think Rich and Jay can attest to this, the trades in New York City are recognizing that in certain marketplaces, adjustments need to be made. There's no question about it. And we're going through that curve now. And what is happening is that while some of the trades have begun to become much more competitive, the subcontractors are using those tools to bid work on both union and non-union projects. Obviously, I'm a proponent of an all-union project for obvious reasons. But even beyond the obvious and the bias, I mean, there are other issues too. The reality is, you know, safety is a big priority for us in the building trades. Last year, we had a terrible year. There were 16 deaths in the industry, 15 of them on non-union projects. And I just learned this morning at 8:45 this morning, there was another very serious accident on East 17th Street on a non-union project where a non-union worker fell 4 floors into the basement, and he's in critical condition as we speak. So one of the reasons why the open shop model is not the best model, one is the non-union is not as organized as the union trades are. I've spoken to a number of contractors and developers who have commented on it's actually very difficult at times to run open shop jobs. I know the non-union is admittedly, getting better, more organized, but they don't bring the level of skill and they don't bring the level of safety to the projects. And what I actually see happening eventually is that you'll see an evolution in the marketplace where it will become more, I guess, opportunistic for the unions to do more projects because of the changes that I foresee coming. I mean, one quick comment, and I'm going to shut up, but you have to really look at the overall industry, and as Jay mentioned, Dick Anderson's here. They do a very good job of breaking down the industry, and so the industry is in segments: governmental work, non-governmental work, and then residential work. Now, the governmental and non-governmental work, meaning institutional work, projects such as LaGuardia, which is actually a private project, those are going to make up 75% of the marketplace over the next couple of years. I mean, the residential actually is going to be 20 to 25% of the marketplace. And, the non-residential work is really the work of the building trades, the work of larger contractors, such as Jay and Richie, and larger subcontractors. So, we don't want to ignore the residential marketplace, nor do, people such as Tishman or Plaza. So while we know that we're going to have tremendous employment opportunity, a $40 billion projection over $30 billion, for all intents and purposes, would be union construction. There's 75% of the marketplace. We don't intend to ignore the residential market because eventually cycles, the residential market will come back up. And I do think it's an evolution going on. There's a lot of pain right now, I think, in the industry with this evolution. But I do eventually see the changes that will be made necessary to be more competitive in that residential market.
Rich, let me ask you, what would you, obviously you're a union, you and Jay both, operate in a union environment, but what would you say you would, if Jeff came to you, the difference between, on hard cores, the difference between non-union and union pricing would be today, if you went out?
Yeah, I think, the simpler type project, the rental type project in the mid-20s, high 20s, the more complex the project, it limits the availability of capable subcontractors in the non-union marketplace. The numbers go down from there. Could be as low as 15%.
But somewhere between 15 and 20.
Somewhere between 15 and 30% total.
15 and 30 with 20, 25. You agree with that?
Yes,
Aaron?
I do.
How about you, Jay? What do you think?
I think on a good day, competing head-to-head against non-union, we would be 10 to 15% on a job that is fairly difficult, not just a cookie cutter. And on a hard day, it would be 20 to 30%.
And Jeff, you said you had 1.5 million feet you've done or doing. What are you union, non-union? How do you look at it from a development standpoint?
It's an interesting time for us to be having this conversation because we're kind of on the precipice of making some of these decisions. And so we haven't made the decisions yet, but we're sitting here and we're looking at that and we're balancing exactly the points that Richie and Jay made with exactly the points that Gary made because we look at it and we say, yes, there's the price of what it looks like on paper to save the money, but at the same time, we're a sophisticated development company. We care a lot about our reputation. We care about the quality of what we're producing. We care about safety a lot. Right. We also care about the schedule. So these are things that we have to weigh carefully in terms of making these decisions.
I think one of the things that people simplify this and say it's cost, it's one number. It's not.
No.
And I think one of the things that you have to factor in is obviously and no one wants to see anyone hurt on a job. You want to have the best safety practices. That's going to cost a little money if you have no safety practices, right?
Right.
And secondly, you want high-quality work to be done. You don't want to have a problem after the fact or along the way, having people not bid and not be able to perform. We've had that on jobs where people, come to us and said, I can't finish. That's problematic. and then you have timing, as Jay said, to get this thing done on the schedule you have. So, everyone talks about, it's like talking about rent per foot. They talk about a number, but I think it's more complicated than that.
Absolutely.
And in that light, I guess I'd say, do you think the union versus non-union, I think is narrowed, because one of the I would say that people in union have a huge advantage in terms of that depth of talent pool for a long time.
Right.
So they can do things on a cycle. They're pouring, 4-day cycles for floors and
2 days.
et cetera, 2 days. So, I mean, what do you guys think about that in terms of the non-pricing for union versus non-union? And what do you see coming up over the next couple of years?
First of all, I think we as a company have to make the same decisions as a developer has to make. If I'm going to sign a $1 billion GMP with a client, I want to make sure that the people that are doing that work for me, as far as the subcontractors, are going to be there at the end of the job. A developer has to look at not necessarily saving $10 or $20 a square foot if he's going from union to non-union, but who's got the deep pockets, and is the company he's giving the work, the company that's going to be here years after the job is complete. And there's uncertainty, obviously, in the non-union market for that to happen, just because the track record is not there. Could be in 10 years, it could be in 15 years. As a big company, we offer very attractive insurance rates because we have the volume to do that. We have the purchasing power, and that means something to a developer. So we will never be in a position where on a trade-by-trade basis we can compete with the non-union companies. However, the below-the-line items, Rich and I will never get the fees on a union job as the non-union, our competition is getting. We just can't get that. Their general conditions are probably the same or higher than ours. Their fees are double or triple of ours, and their insurance rates, because of the safety records, are probably 2 to 3 times as ours. So I have to do some things below the line to make it more attractive for that developer to say, I want to go with Tishman. I understand they're still going to be here in 50 years as opposed to the next guy. But,
Right.
It's really up to the developer to pick the right partner, because it is a partnership.
Rich, what do you think?
We're stuck in the market of having to balance the ability to win a job and what do we need to do to win that job, and that means being price competitive. And wanting to do the job all union because we have certainty when we do the job all union. And right now we're in a marketplace where a lot of clients are demanding that we consider some open shop. And we have to balance that issue and fill our backlog with those clients that would like to do projects all union because of the certainty, and recognizing the fact that we may need to be flexible going forward and consider some trades open shop. To Gary's credit, and to the credit of many of the trades, we've had, we kid about the traditional union and management discussions. The fact is, it's very much a business-like discussion these days. They understand the issues. It's not a contentious discussion at all when we talk about these things. We have a clear discussion about the realities of the marketplace, the economics of building these projects, and a lot of the trades and the leadership of those trades understand those economics and are trying to make adjustments. And so we're struggling constantly with working with individual trades through Gary's leadership to try to get adjustments so these projects that we're having to consider the possibility of having to open shop in some trades. Mm-hmm. We're actually getting a lot of help from the trades themselves to prevent that from happening and have them reduce costs. So it's a evolving market right now, and it's evolving very quickly. And we're hoping that as we see some successes with some of these adjustments, without taking money out of a journeyman's paycheck, there are other ways to make adjustments. We're hoping that that momentum continues and we continue to see reduction in costs. That doesn't help us yet with the lack of availability of subcontractors in the marketplace.
That's a supply and demand issue.
It's supply and demand issue, but we're hoping that as we sort of demystify these collective bargaining agreements, we can attract new subcontractors to the individual trades, create new competition so that all these adjustments that leadership and the unions are making are actually realized through a competitive bid process on a trade-by-trade
Can I
basis.
ask you?
Mike, let me just jump in real
Sure.
quick to just say this. First of
Go
all, the unionized construction industry is a very interesting industry in that there was always going to be disputes or disagreements between labor and management. I mean, it is what it is. But the reality is that in this industry, the unionized trades in the city, we are, probably the biggest proponents of our employers. We support our unionized contractors and subcontractors, and the trades do that individually with their signatories. It's a very, very unique relationship because we understand that if we aren't competitive, we actually say our subcontractors or RCMs will not be able to create the work opportunities for our members. So when Rich talks about and Jay talks about these kind of collaborative conversations, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to work with our employers to figure out solutions to the problems. And that's unlike a lot of other industries or in cases, public sector unions. It's very different. It's a unique relationship and
More of a
partnership.
collaborative partnership.
Very much so. And as the unions, we are extremely supportive of our employers. I mean, we'll go to the MAT for, the building trades will go to the MAT for Tishman, we'll go to the MAT for Plaza. That's how we are. And they'll do their best to go to the mat to keep jobs 100% union. It's a very unique
But given that,
relationship.
let me ask you to think about what ideas you have that can reduce costs. We've heard about things done off-site,
Right.
prefab, you look, cast concrete, all kinds of things,
Right.
concrete to doing pods off thing and bringing them in and assembling them. And obviously, you may require a little less job, but people still have good paying jobs. So
Right.
how have you guys thought about, so Jeff and his next project can basically get a project built at lower cost and not take anything from anyone's pocket? How have you thought
What I'd
about
like
that?
to do there is I'd like to defer that to Jay and
Let him go first.
and to Rich. One of the things, and they can attest to, is that a number of trades have made relaxation on certain fabrication issues.
It's also the project agreements that you strike
And the
too, right?
project labor agreements. As Jay points out, you see that the reality is when the economy really collapsed in 2008 and 2009, project labor agreements were literally the only vehicle that we could use to really move projects forward. And I'll give you 111 6th Avenue, that project was stopped. PLA project was built. Beekman Tower, project was going to stop at 39. PLA went to 76. I mean, I could go on and on and on. That was done in full collaboration with our contractor associations, and we knew we had to make some radical adjustments immediately. And because there was a lack or contraction of work, subcontractors were very aggressive in their bidding. Today, in this environment, it doesn't work because even if you have project labor agreements, subcontractors are reluctant to really enforce the administration of a PLA because they don't want their employees to be having to take less or make adjustments and then in their wage or benefits, they're afraid they're going to lose them. They're going to go to a job site. So we understand that. So we're looking at other ways of creating essentially secondary divisions within a number of the individual trades, different classifications, bringing new members in at different rates so that on an aggregate crew side, you can bring the cost down. Also, again, on some of the fabrication issues, and there are more of those issues that have to be adjusted. So part of it is without taking money out of an employee's pocket in this environment, it's very difficult to do that. There's other ways you can skin this cat, such as issues of fabrication, such as figuring out different crew sizes and aggregates. So that's what I think, when Jay says below the line, these are the type of things that we are now in a very robust discussion about.
What about you, Jay? What do you think about that?
I think together, Rich and I could probably put together a list of items that we would need Gary to deliver, and Gary has delivered a lot. And I think the individual members, it all comes up to, not in my backyard. We collectively know that we have issues for superstructure concrete. We have issues on the hoist. So Rich and I could wave our hand and say, okay, I don't want an operator on the hoist. I want a blended team for the superstructure so I can do concrete at $50 or $55 a foot. And we're doing this without touching someone's wage. But some of the unions that do that work, some will have to reduce some of their manpower on that so it's more efficient. So I think the group understands the issue, but when you get everybody cornered, it's great, but I can't do that, I can't do that. So what we're trying to do, and one of my other hats is working with Lou Coletti at the Building Trades, who works very closely with Gary, was for us, we put together a list of things that we needed. And quite honestly, we met with individual trades, and an individual trade said, I will give you this, but I'm not going to give you that unless all the others follow. So we said to Gary, this is what we need, this is what we need, and everybody has to fall in line because we need everybody to help out and to participate. We just can't have half of the unions helping and the other half sitting on the sidelines. It doesn't help us because that doesn't allow us to have our end goal is full employment. We need more apprentices. We've had those discussions. We'd like to see the 130 members go to 200,000 members because if there's more people at a different rate, and as Rich says, we're not looking to take a nickel away from the journeyman, but it's bringing more folks in at a different rate and allowing them to do work that at the end of the day, they'll get to a journeyman level, but we really need more people in the trades, and that's kind of...
Rich, any comments on
issue.
that? Or agree?
Yeah, you know, if we get a blended rate down into the, you know, the 50s per hour, and we get productivity out of the trades, and we can get rid of some of the requirements, the collective bargaining agreement requirements, they can be very competitive with the non-union counterparts. We've seen this in many trades where there are certain trades that even on the non-union projects, those trades are very competitive and win projects. And we need to see that more across the board. And so those trades that have been able to be competitive, we need to look at the model that they've created and try to get some of the other trades to come along rather than working to the lowest common denominator, the guy who's most concerned about making these adjustments. We need to work towards those guys that are the most willing to make these adjustments. Some of the off-site fabrication issues and some of the, you know, productivity-related issues, you're starting to see some of the trades sort of let down and relax their requirements. We need to see it happen a little quicker, and we need to, for some of the trades that have been holdouts for the longest amount of time, they've actually damaged some of the other trades from, you know, maintaining the marketplace. One of the things that I think is an opportunity right now, and I just got back from China. You know, our parent is a Chinese company, and they brought me to a lot of the factories they use when they develop their own projects in China. And we went to some of the largest factories, and you know, we were competing when we bought Chinese materials in the past few years. There may have been a savings, but we were competing against large, vast volumes of other projects being built in China. These factories are empty. And there's a great opportunity right now to buy materials in China to help offset some of the escalation. And, you know, if you get the right factories, the quality is right there. There's a big variable in the quality of some of the factories. But if you get to the right factories, you can get very high quality products in a very timely fashion and help offset some of the escalation that's been going on in the marketplace. And I think there's a great opportunity to do that right now. And coupled with those things that we're working with labor on, I think we can really reduce the delta between union and non-union as long as we continue to make strides towards productivity and blended rates.
I'm going to open up for questions in a few minutes, but Jeff, if you were building and you were bidding on a project, you didn't own it, how would you, and you know it costs you $400 a foot to do your last job or job right next door, similar scope, no fancy stuff beyond that, how would you price that in that bid? How would you price the 400 for if it was going to be a year or two? What escalation would you use in your mind, if any?
I think that based on, you know, what we all know about the competitiveness of pricing right now and how tight the market is, in terms of, you know, not even just the price of getting the right team together, but the availability of the team, you know, getting facade materials, getting these things. I mean, there is a real gap in terms of where the market needs to be in terms of supply and where the demand is. So I would say, you know, we'd probably look at something close to 10%.
But think about escalations, you know. That's, no one can predict the future, but if you're in a competitive situation, I've heard people say I'm using 4 to 5%. I said, it's crazy, but I won't win if I use 10, right? And again, it gets back to what your pro forma rents to be, what your pro forma sales and condos, whatever if it's a residential or office. So do you think you'd be competitive against that bid if you were open?
I don't know that we're winning a lot of those bids right now. So, but I think you know.
Barbara, what are you already starting to ask questions? I didn't open it up yet. Behave there, okay? Okay, seniority has its wonderful privileges. So, what's your question?
So when we look at technology, you're talking about facade, you're talking about factory. What about on the regulatory side? As a small-scale developer, I've had terrible problems dealing with the building department because you have to deal with an expediter. It takes forever. How do we, as the construction industry, as the real estate industry, impact how the government treats us to be able to get some of the savings that we desperately need?
Anybody have an answer to that question?
Why
do you always ask these difficult
we
questions?
love the building department.
Yeah, they're not going to say the building department sucks. Come on.
Because we can't be shut down today. You know, we were part of an exercise that Dick Anderson put together with putting together a few panels, and I'm not sure when Dick is going to go public with that, but it's helping the city agencies really do a better job and how we can help them do a better job. So, you know, I really won't say more than that because I really don't want to be shut down today on any of my projects. But
by the way, one of the challenges is on escalation.
We don't want you to be shut down either.
When we were chatting, I think this escalation is a huge challenge for both the public projects going on, the public-private. You know, I sit on the Port Authority board, and, you know, looking at LaGuardia, and we say, what will LaGuardia cost? Just what's the, and if it's delayed a year, should be, you know, because obviously there's lots of moving parts and projects that are big, like Moynihan, all the projects these guys mentioned, the tunnels, the big infrastructure project, which are billions and billions and billions of dollars. A year or two, if you have 4 or 5% escalation, it's 8 or 9. Those are massive changes. So, you know, one of the challenges I think is for any developer or any even public-private partnership is getting a correct estimate of a project that's going to be a multi-year project, right?
Yes.
And complicated, and not always, worked out. No drawings are available on that. So, how do you, you know, if you were advising, how would you advise them to look at that?
First of all, I think developers need to be, and public agencies need to be very decisive. They can't depend on a value engineering exercise to save money. Whatever you think you're going to save through the value engineering exercise is going to be gobbled up through escalation during the period of time while you're trying to do that value engineering exercise. So you need to be very decisive. You need to fix your program. You need to get your design in order and really complete a set of documents as much as you can. You know, sometimes timing, dictates when you have to start a project, but you need to be very decisive. To your point about, the public agencies and the building department, your traditional timeframes that you need to file for a permit or file for a crane permit, you need to give it just more time now so it doesn't impact your ability to move forward, which means sometimes you need your design to be, for those components, to be done a little bit earlier, and you need to plan for it. For those projects, living through it right now, it's difficult to turn the clock back, so you're going to have to put up with some of the, additional time frames that we're having to wait for approvals these days. But going forward, you need to take that experience and plan for it. That's the only way to do it.
I think one of the problems with all this is just everybody's really busy. I think that's what, the market is just stretched to capacity. The people down in City Hall, everyone's busy. People are coming. They all want it yesterday. Everyone's project's more important than the other one. So, we're just at a point, and I think, to Jeff's point, if you're buying something, you have to be, I think, relatively conservative. I know people who reserve tower cranes and spent $400,000 or $500,000. Actually, they weren't quite ready to go because they were worried about having the crane and the availability. So they kind of brought forward the crane as an example. So availability, all that stuff is really important. So I guess if I had asked you for a number, and then we are going to open up, what construction costs, where you think we're going to see increases? Jeff said he'd put 10% in there, but wouldn't want to bet his life on it. What would be your single point number? Start with you, Gary. You got all the labor.
Well, I mean, look, in terms of that, I mean, it's very easy to figure out what the labor escalation is based on the collective bargaining agreements. It should be about 3% on the labor escalation.
Yeah, but people use 3% and then go to their dead by the end of the project, you know?
Right, but the point of the, but, no, I know, but what I'm saying, just on the labor, which is only, as Jeff points out, it's only a component of the overall cost.
But, you know, that's interesting, because, you know, commodity prices are down a lot, right?
Right.
We haven't seen steel, everyone says commodity prices are down a lot, China hasn't got capacity. Is steel cost, other stuff you see, is that being reflected in the numbers?
Steel's come down $50 a ton. It has.
So you're seeing some offset
Right.
to the labor.
Right. But again, remember, labor, to Jeff's point, when you look at an overall cost, you know, labor is only it's arguable over the overall cost in terms of acquisition of land, everything else, fees, everything else, architectural fees. It's only about 15% overall.
Counting the land,
You know, I know, that's what I'm saying. So when you say 3%, that's 3%, that's 15 of 15%.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, I can speak to what, you know, in terms of fairly definitively of what the labor escalation is. I think Jay and Richie.
That's the contract, right?
Right, that's very simple.
Is it-
So they can calculate. I think they have a very difficult job. They have to take into material, fluctuation of material, and also, you know, again, the reality of supply and demand, the escalation in the
Right. But
subcontract.
if it's 3% and there's two guys bidding for the job and one doesn't really need it, it's not gonna be a 3% increase,
Absolutely.
right?
That's my point.
Yes, sir, hang on, we'll be right to you, let's see if they did number. Right, hang on, I'm gonna give you a question. What's your number?
I'm 5%, but that's based on an estimate that I give you today. It's not based on
Is that gonna
a
change
quantity
this afternoon?
survey. No, if I give you the estimate, it's going to be 5% for next year, and I will sign on the dotted line on that one.
Okay,
Let me
Rich?
speak to that, if I could, Jay.
Good.
In the peak of the market in 2007, 2008, costs were really out of control. We said 12% across the market. It was probably higher than that. By all measure now, what you're hearing, Mike, is probably half of that in this market.
You think it's 6?
Why is it?
Have you been building anything?
Well, we're not where we were in 2007,
Right.
2008. So why are things somewhat lower now, even though we're just as in just as much of a boom time as we were back in 2007? We have just as much employment. We have even more dollar value, of course, considering inflation. So is this the impact of lower commodity prices? Is it the impact of non-union? Why are we lower now when, by all accounts, we probably should be as high or higher?
Rich, you wanna take a shot at that and then give you a number?
Yeah, I think, you know, the market is reacting to understanding the type of escalation they've experienced. The cost of construction is at an all-time high right now. We recognize the fact that we've experienced those massive escalations in the past, and we're planning for them. Part of the way we plan for them is by going to the trades, making sure that there are adjustments in place. The previous PLAs didn't realize the types of savings that we're seeing on a trade-by-trade basis right now in the unionized construction industry. We're going and buying materials directly overseas and trying to offset some of these other escalating costs. So we've gotten better at trying to manage that escalation, but on certain trades and certain, there is uncontrolled escalation still. You know, there's a tremendous shortage in the unionized construction industry of electrical contractors. And we're seeing tremendous escalation in, you know, electrical bids currently. And, you know, we have to come up with ways to offset that. And so we're trying to create creative ways to do that. And you just can't, you know, snap your fingers and create a new electrical bidder. So we have to figure out other ways to offset those escalating costs, either by looking in another direction or by trying to find savings in other areas of the project.
By the way, I would say that it's difficult to compare, but back when we were doing projects as a Veneto in that time frame, I totally agree, it was like 1% a month, about 12% escalation. I think your number's exact. I would say people I talk to and see what's happened for last year, I think it's a very similar market to that. They thought the increase was much more than 6%. So again, And, you know, we're comparing, what's exactly comparable, you know, we've had more creep in finishes, more creep in architecture, so it's hard, but I would say that the general person thinks it's been more than 6%, you know, and I think it's been closer back to the 06, 07 timeframe, maybe not exactly that.
I think it was the rate of increase that was the problem. After 9/11, you virtually had no work going on in the city. So Tower 7 was probably the first office building that was built. It was built at a trade cost of $225 a square foot. Then the market started to heat up. Everybody got so busy. So we were at the bottom at that time. So we were going up 1 to 1.5% a month. We're now at the point where the numbers, construction-wise, have leveled off. So the rate of escalation is nowhere near the way it was post 9/11 when we had 12 to 18%.
Right. Yes?
Is there a concern at all with all the rezoning that's taking place, particularly in the outer boroughs where
Use that mic if you could, so people can.
Is there a concern at all with all the rezoning that's taking place, particularly in the outer boroughs as it relates to heavy industrial land, and will have the potential of eliminating a lot of the asphalt plants and concrete plants that you obviously utilize?
Yes.
Yes, yes. That's just, and it's also that they're knocking those things down to build buildings, so it's a double whammy.
It's, you know, listen, you're not going to get permitted for, you know, a new batching plant, a new asphalt plant. It's going to be very difficult to get permitted for it. So that limited supply, you know, we want to see remain intact, and it's, yes.
You had a question, ma'am? So, yeah.
Thanks. I think there are two other trends that we've been hearing about, and I'd love to hear the panel's take on them. One is large construction companies setting up open shop affiliates, and the other is design build. How do you think these will affect the construction market?
Why don't you take one and one? Go ahead. Jay, you want to start?
Again, you'll have businesses, Tishman is a union contractor. We legally today can do work open shop. We're not signatory to the New York plan. We prefer to do all work union, and there are union trade contractors that are doing work on open shop projects. So we're meeting with them to say, well, if you're giving those concessions on an open shop job, then I want to have the same benefit of those concessions since I've been loyal to you for 1,000 years, I'd like that same loyalty to be reciprocal. So it is a dialogue, and you know, Gary's got a tough job to do, herding a lot of kittens in a room. But anytime we can help him, and I think Rich is probably in the same
The second
same
part
boat.
of that question?
Well, I was just going to build on that for a second. I mean, certainly it starts to make the conversation a little bit more complicated and interesting to address some of the other ancillary points aside from costs in terms of management quality, safety, all the programs that many of these companies have in place. So it definitely stirs the pot a little bit more.
What was the second part?
Design build.
Design build?
Yeah, you know, design build isn't a great option for a developer who's working with a marketing group and trying to design to a constituency and develop a condo, because you do need to give up design control to anybody who's going to take risk after a certain point, and you're not going to want your contractor making decisions on finishes and things like that in order to make sure that they make their budget. So if you finish your drawings, it's not truly a design build. And I can't imagine on a residential project, maybe on a rental project, but not on these condos, it being design build. Although
Another public project.
One thing about design build.
those are great options for public projects where there's a set of bridging documents that are clear, and somebody can evolve the design based on those bridging documents. On the private work, though, every trade has a certain amount of design assist associated with it, and it is one of the ways that we've employed. We've employed design assist as one of the ways to try to offset some of this escalation, where we bring on subcontractors early on, they assist in the design, work to a budget, rather than waiting for the design to evolve completely, go out to bid just to find out that you had this enormous escalation. So it is one of the ways that we've actually offset some of the escalation.
One of the problems like of design build, think of residential, if you're over budget on the concrete and on the superstructure, just to give an example, you say, I'm going to cut back on the finishes, you know, that nobody in this room would know you know, even a sophisticated, about the concrete and the superstructure, but they're gonna see if the finishes have been, so, you know, one of the problems you get later on in that cycle, if you run out of money or you get tight for money and you start doing things, and if that's a conflict at that point, it's a very tough thing to do because generally, the projects, money problems are later in the project, right? So I think in public-private partnerships or, you know, government, I think it's a much, much different approach, much better approach. Yeah.
So this question's really I think, for Gary and Jeff. So the 421A tax abatement expired. So I just wanted your comments on how you think that will play out in 2016 and what the ultimate impact might be on development.
You know something, Gary?
A little bit.
Share it.
Well, look, what I think will happen, I mean, obviously, this is, everyone's familiar, I think, with what happened with 421A. It was extended for a 4-year period with a 6-month caveat. The legislature and the executive office essentially required that the Building Trades Council and the Real Estate Board of New York come to terms on an MOU over the issue of prevailing wage with 421A. What I'll say is that the Rebney, John Banks, and his team, along with myself and my team, we met regularly. It was very, very good faith, very, very respectful. We, at the end of the process, agreed to disagree on some of the analysis and methodology on how we could get to an agreement. So at this point in time, it's been widely reported that it's back in the issue of 421A, tax abatement is back in the hand of the legislature and the executive. And I can only comment on what I read, is that, you know, there's a concern for the future of obviously affordable residential housing projects without 421A. And my sense is that, you know, the legislature will take it up this session, and I believe we will continue to advocate for what we believe is correct, and not only in terms of ideologically, where there's public subsidies, there should be some public responsibility, but also on analysis that we had done through NYU and Professor U. Kelly, and we'll continue to advocate in some scenarios that there's a prevailing wage tax to 421A.
Jeff?
Yeah, and on just a more macro level, you know, what I would say is that we just have spent the last 45 minutes or so talking about how competitive costs are right now, and so to think that the, you know, expiration of a program that's been so instrumental to additional development in New York City going away, it will absolutely have an impact, and a substantial impact, on the ability for, you know, projects, whether they be, you know, affordable or how much market rate, to be able to go forward. There's no question it's going to have a profound impact.
But I think anyone who says they know doesn't know. I think anybody, it's up in the air right now. It's
Absolutely.
And then, you know, but I tell you one thing, if you think of, you know, Mayor de Blasio, all the input for affordable housing, nothing could kill it more than that thing going away. You know, so there's a lot of different constituencies there. I have no idea how it's going to play out. I think, yes.
You talked about a little bit work rules and blended crews, and I'm wondering if Jay and Richard could talk about whether actual labor rates are more of a cost driver versus the crew configuration, and if Gary could talk about what trades are more or less willing to be flexible on crew assembly.
Yeah, you know, the blended crews, basically what the trades are doing, they're taking a journeyman who may be, you know, at $90 an hour, making an adjustment to their benefit package so it doesn't affect their envelope. You know, they have mortgages and car payments just like you and I. Bringing in a new class of workers that are hopefully competent and able to work side by side with those journeymen at a lower rate, and in many cases also bringing in a helper, and a helper at even a lower rate than that person. So instead of having your traditional 3 or 4 to 1 journeymen to apprentices, now you have 3 journeymen, an apprentice, 3 secondary rate people, and a couple of helpers, so the hourly rate is blended down. Hopefully, in addition to those things, you get added productivity. Now, one of the complexities of it is the subcontractors who are basically taking the risk by bidding to a general contractor for, with with the understanding that that would be their labor crew, are a little reluctant to give what they perceive to be the arithmetic, calculation of savings, and really need to experience a project or two of those savings before significant savings will be passed down the line. So we have yet to see dramatic savings across the board, although some subcontractors have bought into the program, are willing to take that risk, and we've seen significant savings on a one-off type of basis where certain trades are making those adjustments. Subcontractors are confident that they're going to realize those savings, and those savings are being passed along.
We're going to have to wrap it up because our boss over there is gone. In our labor agreement for this project, we only get allowed an hour, so that's it. But I want to say one thing. I think if anyone, just as a final thing, we guys have been around this a long time. If you think about the construction market going forward, for no ill intent, just for capacity, all these things, it's a hostile market if you're a developer right now. It's hard to predict. It's very difficult to get the attention. There's a lot of competing demands, whether public, private, for people trying to do all with good intent. So if you were going into building, buying, I think you just have to realize we're in a pretty tough construction market, and that doesn't show signs of abating over the next year or two if these other projects really get some legs to them, I think. So I think as a base case assumption, I don't think we'll be here next say the construction costs surprise us on the downside. I think there's more risk on the upside. So I think that would just be my closing remark for those who are in the building and in the land purchasing business. So I think, Meg, you want
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you, Mike, and I would like to thank Mike and this panel for really a thoughtful and candid conversation, and I hope that everyone here has enjoyed it.
Thank you.
By the way, thank these guys. You guys have more questions. They're available after.
And my closing note would be
Overtime, though.
that unlike Ms. Rochelle, I don't have a Twitter account, so I'm not going to ask you to follow me. But on behalf of the ULI Program Committee, you will be receiving a survey by email shortly after this, and we really value your feedback, so please give us some. And thank everyone for attending.